I want to be grow up. I want to be Vancouver Giants.
I'm a Giant.
Giants coverage lives here with Giancarlo Nadeau. This is your Giants coverage podcast.
And ultimately got into coaching and moved to Vancouver. And when I got to Vancouver, I coached in the, coached junior hockey, junior A hockey, and ultimately met up with a kid across the street who was our first babysitter and wanted to get into hockey broadcasting, and his name was Dan Russell. And I started to take him along to my hockey games that I was coaching. And he would broadcast into a tape recorder, and it was kind of fun. I'd, listen to some of the game as he came home with me in my car. He's only 14 years old at the time. But his mom was very happy with him being out with me because he knew that even though we came home 11:30 at night, he was in good hands. And all of a sudden one day I got a phone call from him. He was doing newest Bruins hockey on community television, and I get a call from him wanting to know if I'd like to join him as a color commentator, and I did, and the rest kind of is history. It took off from there.
Well, it certainly did take off for you. Over 2,000 games in the Western Hockey League. That's not something that's easy to accomplish, but I know I've talked to you about that before, and it means a lot to you, I know, but at the same time, you're just excited about every single game, and you try and let that record go by you a little bit. And that's one thing that I've always really admired about you, is how humble you are, even though it's not easy to stay in that league, let alone to get into the Western Hockey League. So congratulations on doing that. And hopefully Giants fans and myself get to hear you for much, much longer.
Well, thank you. It's very, very nice of you to say that. Yeah, you know what? It honestly doesn't get old. I don't know why. Headsets will do that to you. You put the headset on and all of a sudden you're ready to go. But I guess what I enjoy as much as anything is the preparation, to know that, I'm going to have the opportunity to talk about a hockey game that I'm watching and, get paid for it. I mean, obviously it's not anything that you can have as a full-time job, but, to get paid for talking about hockey and knowing that, you have listeners and you are the eyes on radio. You are the eyes. I mean, hockey, radio as a whole, Giancarlo, this is the theater of the mind. Yeah. And, to be able to recreate and to be able to add color or whatever you want to call it to a broadcast with a play-by-play guy beside me, it's an honor. It's a privilege. And to be honest with you, those 2,500, whatever I'm at games, include, I guess, about 650 around that area, WHL games on Shaw TV. And I say that because I'm so honored and thankful to Ron Robinson of the Western Hockey League, to Ron Toigo of the Vancouver Giants, to trust me that I am going to represent the team. I'm going to represent the league to a point where, well, it's a trust factor, and I'm humbled by that. That for 650 games on Shaw TV, that the league said, "Okay, Bill, you're the guy." I did every playoff series from 2005 to 2017, 4 playoff series, including the WHL final, was done on Shaw, and I was fortunate to be the color guy picked for every one of those series. I figure that's about 72, 75 series, not games. Those are playoff series, and as I said, the fact that I was chosen, the fact that I got the opportunity to represent not only the Giants but the Western Hockey League is something I cherish deeply.
For sure. And Bill, I got to be honest, I heard a lot of great things about you growing up, but only last year when I really got to step into the booth with you and my good friend Dan O'Connor did I really get a chance to see you and how hard you work, how hard you prepare. And when I was watching you, I was blown away. You're just dedicated to the game, the full 60 minutes. You're always taking notes, always looking at something to talk about. And I know a big reason why you've had so much fun is because, of the LEC guys, the video guys. If you want to just give them a quick shout out, I know you'd love to take that shot.
Well, to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons I'm motivated more the last couple of years, probably if that's even possible, is because what we are doing at the LEC with that video crew, that's a one box over from where we broadcast from, the job that they do, knowing that our game is on CHL hockey, that you can actually buy in and watch the games, and the numbers apparently are terrific. And to know that I'm not even connected by headset with them, but they're listening. They already know in 2 years working with me, or is it 3 even, but they've gotten so good that they can tell by what Dan O'Connor or Eddie Gregory this year, what we are talking about, that they want to show that as a replay. And what you see on the screen as a replay, it allows me to talk over that. And not so much, obviously, people in the building or people listening by radio, but people watching online. That's extremely exciting. Now, I'll tell you, Giancarlo, that crew is not very far away from what you can expect from the crew on the Shaw broadcast or even on Sportsnet.
No, certainly incredible stuff, whether you're at the game or you're watching it, as you mentioned, on CHL TV. Always do a great job. And it also starts with the broadcasters as well. And Bill, you've been doing a great job for such a long time, so keep it up. One of the questions that I've got for you, you mentioned it, you used to work with Shaw, now you've got the CHL, you're on Sportsnet 650. What are some of the biggest differences, some of the biggest changes you've noticed from the different providers? Because every sort of broadcast provider has a different way to do business. Have you really noticed anything different, or is it business as usual for you?
Well, the first thing that you notice is how basically, if they're doing a good job, which they are, how smooth everything is. People at home, I sometimes when I'm watching a game, I tell my wife, I say, okay, now you watch. You're going to get a different camera angle on that play right here. You watch. You're going to get a wide shot. You watch. You're going to get a tight shot of one player going to the bench. All of that is seamless to the viewer. But when you step in the truck, honestly, I got to be honest with you. Every time, and it wasn't often, but when I was doing Shaw television, when I step in the truck and I'd see that wall full of cameras, and I'd see 10 or 12 people in there, and everything working, and I'm thinking, all I got to do is talk about it, it actually became intimidating as to how this all comes together. And, I was very, very fortunate. I had a producer out of Calgary, Dave Roberts, who allowed me to talk to tape. And the guys I worked with, one of the guys I worked with on tape for Shaw does Hockey Night in Canada, Frank Hannon, and everything usually goes through the producer. Okay, he produces the show. He's going to be the guy that's going to let you at home, he decides what you're going to see. And what I was able to do was be able to talk directly to the guys on tape and say, listen, can you run that back? Can you run this one back? And then I'd get a replay on my monitor that you couldn't see at home, and I'd be able to say, start it here. No, take it back a little bit further there. And, sometimes we would get 3 things happen on a play stoppage. A hat trick. We'd show a crossbar at one end, we'd show a big hit at the other end, and then a shot block and a whistle somewhere else, and all of those would happen during a play stoppage. That's how exciting that got. And by the way, I've seen the guys at the LEC, our crew there, sometimes do two things on one play stoppage. That's pretty good for them. But that has changed, and that doesn't happen much where the guys that are doing the talking, which is called the on-air talent, where they're able to talk to anybody other than the producer. Hey, but they got more camera angles now than ever. Other than that, it's probably pretty much the same. I think some of the American crews, some of the American broadcasts where they isolate on players and they got the little circles around them, they show the X's and O's moving around. That's pretty advanced. We never had quite that. But basically, it's all the same, I think. And more importantly, I know nothing about how it all works.
No, but you do know how to put on a good show. And you mentioned seeing a wall full of cameras, and many broadcasters have said it. the Bill Wilms wallpaper inside the broadcast booth where you take a bunch of notes, you stick them all over the walls. You still do that, Bill?
Well, you get stuck doing that. Your old habits die. I mean, don't die easily. And I still got in my sitting in beside me here. I got the messiest office you could possibly see, and I've got stuff that from 10, 12 years ago notes that I keep. For me, the preparation. You've been in the booth. You know that what I've got on paper is what's hopefully some of it, maybe a third of it, is going to go to air. But the important thing too, and really important, is I've been fortunate. 20 or 25 play-by-play guys, and maybe you one day if I stay around long enough. You have to have synergy, really good synergy. And one of the keys when you work with me, and it doesn't matter who you are, 25 guys, trust me. We have the old Bob Cole rule. When the puck is moving, the play-by-play guy's talking. When the puck's not moving, the color guy's talking. And Dan O'Connor and Brendan Batchelor and Peter Labardius and Dan Russell, all of those guys knew that, hey, when the whistle goes, stop talking, because Bill's got something he's going to say. And not that I'm always saying something terribly important. As a matter of fact, the listener will decide if Bill Wilms is saying something very important. The thing is, I think it's important, and fortunately, I hope I'm right most of the time. But the key is when the whistle goes, get out quick, wrap up what you're just saying, and then let the color guy, let the analyst talk. And then we play off each other. And boy, I'll tell you, that's called tagging. When I've been able to say something and the play-by-play guy, even just before the puck is dropped, tags it. Even if he just says, yeah, Milan Lucic is on the ice right now because I just talked about it. Milan Lucic is going to take the face-off for the guy. Tagging, playing off each other. I think that's the biggest thing to successful play-by-play color commentary.
For sure. And that was my next question. You answered it perfectly without me even asking you. Was the chemistry between broadcasters, because you've mentioned you work with 100 of them, lots of them. And one of the always things you want to keep an eye on as a broadcaster is the chemistry between the two guys. And it seems like you guys have been able to do a great job. It doesn't matter who you've been working with. It always sounds really well done. And the fact that you sort of mentioned you guys got to work together on it and find that chemistry is exactly what's needed to be successful in the booth.
Exactly. I mean, if you were calling the game and the puck stops and I say something now, before that puck drops, if you just say something that indicates you listen to me, and when you call something special on the ice, a great play or a great save, it's important for me to tag you and let the listeners know that I'm listening to what you're saying instead of just going off on your own all over the place. And I know some teams, some broadcast teams don't have that kind of chemistry. I've been very, very blessed.
Well, Bill, it's safe to say that because you've called so many games, some of them sort of blend into one another.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. They do. And it's hard sometimes to pick out, what stands out, what kind of games stand out more than others. But, there are some, yeah, but they tend to blend. But I'm always impressing myself at how much I do remember of some of the games. It's kind of like, golf shots. I can remember some of the tournaments I played 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago. I can remember almost all 18 shots on some tournaments that I played. And yet I can't find the milk in the fridge.
Well, there you go. That's how you know it was a natural talent for you there, Bill.
Yeah, it's fun.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, sort of like games sort of blending into one another, the players in the Western Hockey League, when they're in their rookie years, usually do blend in. They don't usually stick out. It's not usually until their final years in the league where they sort of begin to stick out more, put up more points. What's it like for you to see the progression in a player?
That's the biggest fun, besides actually talking about the game, watching a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old come into camp, play as a 16, and exit the league as a 19-year-old because you can only have 3 20s. To age out as a man is incredibly satisfying. I had Zach Ostachek at our place when he came up as a rookie for the Vancouver Giants. We billeted him as a 15-year-old. Matthew Edwards, we billeted him for the playoffs last year. And to see 4 years later, what a guy like Zach Ostachek is doing and what he looks like as a man and how he is as a person. You know what? We did 3 playoff finals in a row between Edmonton Oil Kings and the Portland Winterhawks, 15, 16, 16, 17 in that area, or maybe even a little earlier. And when we were doing games in Portland at the Moda Center with 12,000 people in the building, and then back in Rexall Place in Edmonton with 10, 12,000 there, and to watch these kids as 17 and 18-year-olds have to perform. You can't come to the bench and say, sorry, my bad. You can't make mistakes. You have a power play in the Western Hockey League final. You got to execute. Don't mean you have to score, but you got to execute it. And if you got a penalty kill, you have to execute it. And those are the most memorable times in my career, is to watch those kids at that age. They're young kids, 17, 18 years old, 19, to execute at the top level in the most hostile environment with everything on the line. Wow, I get goosebumps just thinking about it right now. I really do.
Well, Bill, there's one player I want to ask you about. He 2 years stint with the Vancouver Giants. He's a guy that put up 11 goals as a rookie in the 2010-2011 season. Season later, 40, eventually drafted by the Arizona Coyotes, round 2 of the NHL draft. That's Jordan Martinook. What do you remember about him?
I'll tell you, it's funny you should mention him, and it is interesting because I don't spend a lot of time at training camp. I do go. I kind of familiarize myself with some of the guys, but nothing really happens until the preseason games, and obviously into the regular season. So so many years in the league, training camp doesn't intrigue me. And I say all that because I do go to watch the first scrimmage. And I remember in Martinook's first year with the Giants, I remember that like it was yesterday. I looked and I saw this kid out there, and I knew he was from the Alberta Junior Hockey League. He was a free agent signing, if I'm not, but yeah, I know he was. And I thought, who is that kid? I didn't watch him 4 shifts, 3 shifts, and I knew. One of the few guys I could say, I knew this guy was going to make our hockey club. He was that impressive. The way he skated, the way his body size, his frame, his mindset, what he did with the puck, how he used his body to battle for pucks, to win loose puck battles. I don't know if there's another guy there. I think there might have been one guy that I remember the same. Oh, I know, one other guy, and as recent as Ty Thorpe. I remember that a couple years ago. Same thing. Martinook and Ty Thorpe. Obviously, I don't think Ty Thorpe's going to have the career that Martinook had. But to your point, Jordan Martinook caught my attention the first 3 shifts I watched him play in scrimmages. And I thought, yeah. And I mean, he went on, as you said, what did he get, 11 goals first year?
11 goals in the first year.
And then I think 40. Now, did he go on? Has he been a captain of the Carolina Hurricanes?
Not the captain. It's one of the Stahl brothers who's the captain, but he is one of those big players for the Hurricanes this season.
Well, he to your point, I'm glad you asked me that, because he's one guy that absolutely stood out for me. And maybe I talked to his parents an awful lot the second season. We talked about his future as a professional in the National Hockey League, and they always thanked me as working to promote. I remember Milan Lucic thanked me in 06 at the Memorial Cup in Moncton. And he really liked this. He came up to me. We didn't win it. And he said, Bill, I want to thank you for pumping my tires. I'll never forget the word, for pumping my tires. And I know the Martinook family did the same thing. And I mean, I did it because, well, it had to be done. They were that impressive. It was my job to convey that message of how good Martinook was, and how good, a Bowen Byram was, and how good a Brendan Gallagher and Evander Kane and all those guys. So that's my job. Yeah, so it was an honor to do that, and not totally surprising. Well, probably a bit that Martinook has gone on to have the enormous success he's had with the Hurricane.
For sure. He's 30 years old, 34 points in 82 games this season. He's a remarkable player, a player that has certainly been a big part of Carolina's success. And NHL's Masterton Trophy nominee as well. Some same traits have been displayed with him with the Giants that you just talked about, and now that he has with the Carolina Hurricanes. So he certainly is a big player for them. He was also just one of 6 Hurricanes there, Bill, to play all 82 games in this regular season, despite playing through some injuries. So that's also credit to the kind of player that he is.
Oh yeah, he's a tough guy, no question about it. He plays a heavy game.
You mentioned guys like Gallagher, guys like Lucic and Bowen Byram as well. Martinook, and he seems like one of those guys that people in Vancouver have forgotten about a little bit. He's one of those players that isn't on the Vancouver Giants wall of honor. And perhaps he's got a good case to be put up on there next season, considering the success he's had so far this year. What do you think about that? And do you think the Giants are going to eventually put him up on that wall?
Well, you made a good point. There's not a ton of people that remember him as a Vancouver Giant. Only 2 years, but two very important years. I think the Giants do such a great job of that wall of honor, and it's very, very impressive, and it's very humbling for a lot of these guys to be put up there. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the conversation. You're absolutely right.
For sure. Bill, I want to talk to you about one more thing if I can. We talked a lot about hockey. Let's talk about some golf here. You love hockey, but you also love your golf. Why do you love golf so much, and why is it so much fun for you to take part in it?
Well, in 1966, when I graduated from the University of North Dakota, I really didn't pursue turning pro with the Boston Bruins. I mean, the money would have been horrible. There was only 6 teams in the NHL. We didn't have agents. That wasn't even a consideration. And so, I never did get a contract offer. I could have pursued it. Again, without an agent, I would have had to do it myself. But if I would have signed, it might have been for $5,000. That would have been, maybe the maximum. And so and then you would have never played in the NHL for the first probably 6, 7, 8 years. You might have had to play, in their farm team. And so when that didn't happen, I started playing golf, and I started playing a few tournaments, and this was still in North Dakota, because I was there from 66 to 68. After graduating, I was assistant hockey coach there. And so I started playing, and one thing kind of led to the other. And, the older I got, when I got into my 30s and 35 and all that kind of stuff, I must have played in, 100 pretty big golf tournaments. I got fortunate, and I started making a few BC teams. When you finish in the top 4 in your provincial, in the BC provincial tournament, that's usually who's picked to represent BC in the Canadian. And, once I got to do that once, I wanted more of it. And I was fortunate, even in 1996, to play for Canada in a 2-man world tournament in Lima, Peru. And that was the first time I ever played with the Canadian flag beside my name on the scoreboard. And so, one thing led to another and another, and before you knew it, my career was over, and I had made 8 British Columbia teams, and it's an honor to make one. And so, you kind of are humbled by that as well. But you tasted it, and you say, well, you know what, I want to do it. I finished second. I finished second in the BC Senior 3 times. And I did win the Super Senior 3 times, which is 65 and over. And, I've been fortunate. I was fortunate to win a PNGA Senior Amateur, which is Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and British Columbia in 2006. And, now as I'm winding down my career, I still have pretty high expectations, even though you don't hit the ball as far. But, you can still play the game. You can play golf late in life, man. And it's such an enjoyable game. And, even when COVID was at its worst, people were playing golf. I mean, it was safe to get outside. And, it's a wonderful, wonderful sport. And I've been blessed to, have had some success. And I for most of my career, I would say I never played golf recreationally. It was always for a purpose. It was always because I was preparing for a tournament, a national, a Canadian amateur somewhere, a Canadian mid-amateur somewhere in Canada, or a Canadian senior, or wherever, or provincial tournaments. Been fortunate and really, really been blessed to be able to do that.
For sure, and it's something that's hugely popular here in BC, and I know a lot of people are involved with that. Another thing that's popular here, Bill, the Vancouver Giants. I've got one more question about them before I let you go. If you're talking to someone and they're interested in being a fan of the Vancouver Giants, what's one reason why they should cheer for the team next season?
Well, it's the reason. It's not so much to cheer for me, Giancarlo. It's not so much to cheer for one game, but it's to cheer the process. To cheer the journey. If you come out in September and you watch the Giants game to start with, I can assure you that in April, in March, you're going to end up with a whole lot different looking team. Not only in skill, but in maturity. Not only in maturity, but in players that are physically stronger and bigger. And it's the journey of the Western Hockey League that I think is the most fascinating sport, level of hockey, if you will, to watch, because they haven't reached the ceiling. Every guy, I can assure you that every guy that puts a Giant uniform on this coming September in the first game, I can tell you 100%, not one of them has reached their ceiling as to how good they're going to be, at what level they're going to peak. And then guys like Dale Sipe and Ron Toigo and Pete Toigo and all the guys that have so much to do with the product on the ice make it such an enjoyable evening.
For sure, I couldn't agree with you more there, Bill. Obviously, lots goes on behind the scenes to make the Vancouver Giants who they are, and I want to thank you for making my podcast what it has been. You've been a tremendous guest, one that I've really wanted to get on this podcast for a very long time, since I first thought about doing this. Somebody that I've grown up listening to, and to hear your voice and see you now, it's a pretty cool feeling.
Hey, good luck in your new gig. I think you're going to do. I know you're going to do very, very well. You're a great host, and thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, man.
All right, that's Bill Wilms, the color analyst for your Vancouver Giants, signing off now. Thank you so much for joining the two of us, and enjoy the rest of your week.
The Giants Coverage Podcast. Coverage with heart.